Okay, you guys have been patient. You've been asking for it, but you've been patient enough, so to speak. We're going to talk about Mariner prospects. I'm going to give you my top 15 prospects entering the 2024 season, obviously subject to change, but the internet is forever. Before we get into it, I ask that you please hit like and please hit subscribe on this video. And I also ask that you go check out simplyseattle.com because Simply Seattle provides the very best in Seattle sports gear. Awesome stuff for the Mariners, of course, but awesome stuff for the Kraken, the Huskies, the Storm, the Cougars, the Sounders, the Supersonics. You can find it all at Simply Seattle. Once you find all of that good stuff, and you're going to find a ton of good stuff for your holiday shopping, use promo code MOLLYWHOP15. That's MollyWop15, and it will automatically take 15% off your order. It's an awesome deal. We cannot appreciate the support of Simply Seattle enough. They're awesome people who do awesome stuff. And it's just really cool to say that, yeah, they're great. They're great. All right, let's talk about a few names that are not on this list and a few might surprise you. I want to start with Cole Phillips, who the Mariners just got in the Kelnick deal. Impossible to rank. Just impossible. Coming into his draft, would have been a first-round pick if not for Tommy John surgery, but has not thrown a professional pitch. I talked to a bunch of people about him. And I've watched lots of video, obviously, of him as a high school guy being a draft dude. Impossible to rank. Just flat out impossible. The version that we saw prior to his draft would probably be in the 7 to 10 range, maybe a little higher. But we don't know. We literally do not know. So I'm not going to rank him. Zach DeLoach. I like Zach DeLoach. I like the names above better. I think that the swing and miss might be problematic. It's funny that DePoto has gone on this tangent, isn't the right word, but has really stressed how much swing and miss bothered him in 2023. That's fine. Zach DeLoach struck out 173 times last year. Now, he also drew 86 walks and had some solid numbers regardless of those strikeouts. I think he can be a nice player, but more of a bench bat, and I just kind of believe in the names above a little bit more. The name that might surprise you the most that's not on here is Tyler Locklear. And Tyler Locklear was literally prospect 16. Definitely see the offensive upside. Concerned that the numbers for AA Arkansas were pretty mediocre. Not bad. And I just don't think that this is a very good defensive player. I don't think he's a third baseman. I think he's probably going to play first base. Maybe has the offensive profile to do it. I just think more bench bat, lefty platoon guy, which Mariners are clearly getting excited about now, hearing that. But I don't think he has quite the upside to suggest that he is a top 15 prospect. All right, let's go into him. You're going to see a lot of pauses because I have to bring up notes for every prospect. But number 15 on the list is Taylor Dollard. So you just heard me go on a rant isn't the right word either, but talking about upside, right? And Taylor Dollard's upside doesn't come close to Tyler Locklear's. And we're talking about a pitcher that only made 3 starts before undergoing labrum surgery on his right shoulder. Concerning. Super concerning, regardless of, position. Like, it'd be concerning if a shortstop had that. It'd be concerning if an outfielder, but especially a pitcher. That's a very concerning injury. Shoulder injuries are the hardest to come back from. And he only makes 3 appearances before that. But if there's a pitcher that I feel like, okay, we have to see how the stuff bounces back for Taylor Dollard. And Taylor Dollard's stuff, let's just be honest, it's not great. We're talking about 4 average pitches, maybe a little bit better on the slider. And the change, I think, has a chance to be a really nice pitch as well. But we're not talking about elite stuff, not even close. We're talking about a guy who relies on command. And his command in 2022 was outstanding. We're not going to talk about the 16-2 win-loss record because that just really doesn't tell me a whole heck of a lot. But this guy pounds the strike zone, and he pitched outstanding in AA and was well on his way, I think, to making starts for the Seattle Mariners in 2023. I would have been shocked if healthy that if he wouldn't have made starts in 2023. But he wasn't, so he didn't. I still believe in Taylor Dollard. I think he has a chance to be a very nice back-end starter. I don't think he's ever going to be a mid-rotation arm or a front-of-the-line starter anyway. Command's going to have to be elite for him to reach his ceiling. And I'm usually pretty hesitant about pitchers like this. It's one of the reasons why some other Seattle Mariners second round picks that they've made who have not worked out at all, I was pretty hesitant about making the jump. I believe in Taylor Dollard. I do believe that Taylor Dollard has a chance to be a very nice starter. Here's hoping that he can come back to that form because, again, injuries do suck. At number 44, we've got Alberto Rodriguez, and Rodriguez ends up hitting 300, 380, 504 with 14 home runs and 8 stolen bases. Splits the year basically between Everett and Arkansas. Not an even split, but 72 games with the Aqua Sox, 46 games with the Travelers. Really impressive in Everett. 306, 393, 580 with 11 homers. Arkansas, still good with the 291 average and 361 on base percentage. Power drops pretty precipitously here, 385. And that's my biggest concern with Alberto Rodriguez. What is the power? What are we talking about here with this guy? Because, he's 5'10", 230. The size suggests that he has the ability to hit for power. And I think he incorporates enough of his lower half to be a 15 to 20 homer guy. But that's not guaranteed. Worth pointing out, this was the guy the Mariners got from Taijuan Walker at the deadline in 2020. That seems like ages ago. But all Alberto Rodriguez has done really is hit. Now, he didn't hit for power, and it's worth pointing out, and I should have brought this up with Locklear too, a little tougher place to hit for power in Arkansas as well. But I really believe in the hit tool for this guy. There's a lot of 50s here. Maybe everything ends up being 50 here. But everything 50 could be a pretty solid player. It'd be nice if he could play shortstop. It'd be really nice if he could play shortstop, left-handed shortstop. Let's see it. It'd be nice if he could play center field. Not going to happen. We're talking about a corner outfielder for sure. But I do think that there's more offensive upside than being discussed here. It wouldn't shock me if this was a 55 grade hit tool when everything is done, maybe even plus. And it's probably going to have to be in order to justify ranking him above some of the guys that I am. But I do believe in Rodriguez's bat. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a chance to play for the Mariners in 2024. Not counting on it. Certainly, you're not implementing his numbers in or anything like that. But I think there's enough offensive upside here that Alberto Rodriguez can someday be a regular for a decent little baseball team. I'm slowing down because I need to open more stuff. At number 13 on the list, I have Johnny Farmelo, the 29th pick of last year's draft. Basically, the Mariners traded Julio Rodriguez winning Rookie of the Year for Farmelo. That's a weird thing to say, but that's how they acquire that pick. Awesome. Incredibly good athlete. The athleticism is never going to be a question mark with Farmelo. 6'2", 205 to 210 pounds. He looks the part. And I think that there is above average power potential in his bat. I think he has a chance to be a very good defensive player. There's a lot of work to be done here. The swing needs work. Pitch recognition, as far as I can tell, needs work. The power is more an idea than a realization, which is fine. Now, he's already 19 years old. So would I prefer this to be a couple years younger with this type of profile? Yeah, to be honest. And that's why he ranks last of the first round picks that we're going to be talking about today. By the way, Aiden Smith also almost made this list as well. I think Aiden Smith doesn't have quite the upside of the names that we were talking about above, other than Taylor Dollard, of course. But I think Aiden Smith is another really nice draft pick they made. Probably didn't talk enough about him, but easily could be in this top 15, maybe even in this top 10 with a solid season in 2024. But Farmelo is more an idea of a good baseball player than a great one, or an idea of a baseball player rather than a realized one, is what I meant to say. And there's nothing wrong with that as a teenager. There's just a little more risk with Farmelo than I think some of the other guys we're going to talk about. One in particular that is coming up pretty soon. But yeah, Farmelo has the upside to be a middle of the order, or maybe even like if the pitch recognition does come, maybe the type of guy that you see hit at near the top of the order. But there's a little more risk here than with some of the other prep bats that we're going to be talking about that they drafted. Yeah, Johnny Formello, a really intriguing prospect, but there is and it's true for a lot of prospects, a lot of possible outcomes here. At number 12 on this list is Prelander Baroa. And look, I wish I could rank Baroa higher. It's just hard to do for a pure reliever. And at this point, that's what Baroa is. Baroa is a reliever. They made the switch. It was probably the right decision, more than probably. It was the right call. It's going to be the best thing for him long term because as good as his bat missing stuff is, and it's sick, the command is pretty darn terrible. In 43 appearances with Arkansas, he has a 2.89 ERA, 101 strikeouts, 39 walks. He only allowed a 193 average. Look, those walks are problematic. But that swing and miss stuff, it's more than palpable. Heck, we saw it in the 2 appearances he made with the Mariners. Yeah, he had extreme control issues in that first appearance he made. So much so that the Mariners did not count on him again until the very, and I mean the very end of the year. But you watch that last appearance he made, that stuff is nasty. 70-70 fastball slider. He also has a pretty good change that he can use as well. Probably not going to be using that as much as a reliever. I mean, he has the stuff to be that next great, maybe not too strong a word, because if we're talking great, he probably belongs higher than 12th. But it's very hard for me not to see him being an excellent high leverage reliever as long as the control is just good enough. He's going to frustrate. There's no question about it. We've seen Matt Brash frustrate. We saw Andre Munoz frustrate with his command this year and not throwing enough quality strikes. But that stuff is just filthy. Just absolutely filthy. I'm using the word absolutely too much again, and I guarantee I'll be using it a bunch in this video. I hope that he makes the opening day roster. With all due respect to some other arms he'll be competing against, there's no doubt there's risk, but I'm not sure any Seattle Mariner pitcher, and I do mean that, I do mean any Mariner pitcher has more upside in the system right now than Prelander Baroa. And speaking of pitchers, Emerson Hancock comes in at number 11 for me. And folks, so last time we'll be talking about a Seattle Mariner pitcher. And while that's not ideal, it's worth pointing out how many young quality pitchers the Mariners have called up who have, if you care about cost control, yeah, but also have a chance to get a lot better in these next coming years as well. That's what really matters to me and should matter to you, is the fact that they do have a lot of talents in young arms. That being said, and there's some other arms that could have been in this conversation as well, like we talked about with Cole Phillips, Walter Ford, the Vanilla Missile. What a heck of a nickname. Some young arms that they've drafted over the last couple of years who could make that next step. But this is an offense-heavy system. It's really a shortstop-heavy system, and we'll get into those, of course. But Emerson Hancock, let's go over the numbers that he posted. A 4.32 ERA with AA Arkansas, 98 innings, 107 to 38 strikeout to walk ratio. Not elite, but not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. He makes 3 starts for the Mariners before the injury, a 4.50 ERA, only strikes out 6 batters, walks 3. Being blunt with you, I mentioned this when we did the review of all the Mariners who only made a few appearances. I wasn't terribly impressed with Hancock, what I saw from him at the major league level, but I can't quite give up on the guy that I saw at Georgia in 2019 when this guy was the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick. And he slides to 6 in a very good draft class, to be fair, but he slides to 6 and the results have just been really inconsistent. And the fastball is downgraded. The slider and change have downgraded as well, but are still above average pitches. I would call the slider plus the change just a notch below that. It's going to have to rely on those pitches. He'll also show you a curveball. Control isn't spectacular, but good enough. Command isn't spectacular either, but good enough. We're talking about a back-end starter at this point. I just wonder 2 things. 1, at the age of 24, can he take another step forward? And number 2, the other thing I wonder here, what are we talking about if this guy is moved to relief? I can't help but remember what he showed at the Futures game. in relief in that short spurt. That stuff was really impressive. It's just one game where he probably was jacked to the you know what. But I can't help but wonder. Ultimately, I think Seattle, as long as he's in the organization, is going to keep him as a starter. Not a ton of upside here. Probably. I can't help it. I can't help but wonder if he can get back to that form. Everything that he's shown as a professional suggests no, but the version that he is right now isn't bad and is worthy of being in that top 10 consideration. But yeah, that's the last pitcher we will talk about for your Seattle Mariners. So we're into the top 10 and we're starting with Jonathan Clase, who his overall numbers end up being a pretty big disappointment, if only because of what an incredible start he got off to. Now, they're not bad. He finishes with an 802 OPS, 242 average, 353 on base percentage, 449 slugging percentage. He ends up hitting 20 home runs, splitting his time with Everett and Double-A. Actually, split is not fair. He's played 21 games for Everett and then 108 games for Arkansas. So split, but not even kind of a close split. But the most intriguing thing here is Jonathan Clase ends up stealing 79 bases. And that's what's going to carry Clase is his athleticism. And we saw it in the Futures game. It was awesome to see that he was able to make an absolutely spectacular catch in the outfield during that game. I think he's going to be a very solid outfielder. Not spectacular, but I think he can be above average. I think if you were going to ask me to give a grade, and maybe you are, I would say 55. Not a great arm, but doesn't really need it if he's going to be in center field, which I imagine he will, and maybe rotate around a little bit, but you don't need it to be a great arm in order for him to be a solid outfielder. There is some pop that is developing, even though he is not a very big guy. 150 pounds, not the last not big guy that we will talk about on this list. I think we're talking about average power. I like the approach. I like that he is trying to be a legitimate leadoff hitter, and he's worked counts the last 2 years. He walked 65 times in 2022 for Modesto. He walked 82 times in 2023 over 129 games. But 165 strikeouts is far too much for this profile. Far too much. And that's close to 300 strikeouts over the last 2 years. That's not going to work. That's just flat out not going to work. He has to make more consistent contact. You know, if he wants to try to be a true outcome player, then the power's got to get a heck of a lot better. I just don't see that. I do see a swing that suggests that he can make hard contact to all parts of the field, switch hitter. I think the hit tool has the potential to be above average with some swing change stuff. But right now, it's probably closer to fringe average, which just isn't good enough. It's very hard to rank Jonathan Clase because just on pure talent, he probably belongs in the top 6. In terms of realized stuff and the flaws that I see, he's probably closer to the bottom 15, like 15, 14, 13. So I kind of split the difference here. There's such a wide range of outcomes. Now, here's the good thing about Jonathan Clase. He's 21 years old. There's lots of times to figure that out, and you cannot teach his athleticism. Top of the scales runner, developing pop, has good feel for the game. And I think it's very encouraging how much he wants to get on via walk. But maybe we need to see a little more assertiveness from him. Take the assertiveness that you saw on the diamond as a base runner and in the field, maybe apply it more to. Now, I'm not saying things haven't been interesting, but I think this is where things really get interesting because I think from 9 to 6, and maybe even 5, although I think there's a clear top 5 in the system. People will disagree, but I think there's a clear top 5. But 9 to 6, you could rank in whatever order. And I purposely am not saying the other reverse of that because I don't want a bunch of nice jokes on this. But number 9 for me is Ty Pete, who was my favorite of their picks. He's not the best prospect of the players they drafted. We'll talk about one in particular. But he's my favorite of them because I just love these types of selections. Especially, I love the fact that they acquired someone with the upside that Ty Pete possesses. This is a guy who turned 18 in August. So he'll spend almost the entire 2024 season as an 18-year-old. And he was able to reach full season baseball at that age, which is really impressive. The numbers for Modesto aren't great, but it's only a 14 game sample. And it's not like he was like absolute trash. 242, 299, 387. Ends up hitting 2 homers. He steals 3 bags. 19 strikeouts in those 62 at bats tell you that, there's work to be done. But he dominated in a very small sample, but dominated in the rookie campaign. 351, 429, 432. And rookie campaign, I mean rookie league campaign, playing in Arizona. Didn't hit any home runs, but the power is very obvious with this kid. I mean, we are talking about at least above average raw power and close to plus. And you know what? Wouldn't shock me if it was plus plus. And it wouldn't shock me if this guy ends up with at least 4 plus tools. The power, the run, the arm, and the glove all have a chance to be outstanding. There's some concern that he might outgrow shortstop and he has to move to third base. I think if that does happen, he could be among the best defensive third basemen in baseball because he has a very good arm and he has very good hands. There is work to be done. And I think you could justify ranking Pete a lot higher, and you certainly could justify ranking him lower. No question about it, because there's a lot of stuff that has to be done here. And there is a lot of swing and miss. There's a long swing. It wouldn't shock me if he really struggles to hit for average as a professional. But everything tools-wise is here for him to be a star. I also think the personality is awesome. The hair is certainly awesome. We're ranking him 1-1 in the Mariners system in hair. All due respect to some other guys. But Ty Pete has the type of upside that's the type of guy you target where they did. Took him 30th right after Farmelo. And yes, Farmelo and Pete definitely have volatility, as all prep baseball players do. But just in terms of pure upside, I only think there's a couple players that beats him in the system. And that is It's time for another shortstop, and far from the last shortstop that we will talk about, Michael Arroyo. Michael Arroyo got off to an absolutely scorching start, and things slowed down. And yes, he did have an injury. He was only able to play in 61 games last year. But in those 61 games, he hit 255, 403, 400, 3 homers, 8 stolen bases. The calling card here is his approach and defense. He is, I think, an above average shortstop. He could play second base, probably plus, has enough arm that I think you could play third. But he's going to be a shortstop, I think. And I think he's going to be a pretty darn good one. And you love the walks. You love that with a 255 average, you're seeing a 403 on base percentage. That tells you 28 walks in 61 games. That is excellent. Not the greatest athlete, but has such good feel for the game, has such quick instincts. There's very little doubt to me that he's going to be a shortstop. I think there's some power here that could be realized. There's work to be done. Of course there is. He is a player that I believe doesn't turn 20, and he turned 19 at the beginning of November. Happy belated birthday to you. And I think he has a chance for an above average hit tool as well. Now, he kind of fell apart a little bit after the injury. In his time with Modesto, actually, he only hit 234. His numbers are helped by his time in the rookie league. He hit 636, 692, 909. And good for him. That's not really an indicator. Far too good of a player to be playing in that league. I think he has one of the higher floors of any Mariner prospect. It's very easy for me to see him, at the very, very least, being a utility player. But it's not hard to see him becoming starting shortstop either. And look, there's a lot of good shortstops in this system. We're going to talk about another one next. In fact, yeah, this guy has the highest upside in the system. But I don't want to talk about him just yet. I just want to finish with Michael Arroyo. Really solid prospect. One I could see actually being moved of the prospects that they have. But he also creates the room for you to move some of the other ones too. They're really good at the shortstop position right now. And that includes my son, JP Crawford, of course. Not a great defensive player, but you cannot complain about those offensive numbers. Okay, up next, that shortstop we were just talking about, Felnin Celestin. Celestin did not make his debut in 2023 because of a hamstring problem, and also because of the fact that I believe he's 11 years old. I'm being facetious there, but he turned 18 in September. And it feels like Selston has been in the system for a lot longer than he has. He signed back in January. But the reason that is because the Mariners have been rumored to sign this guy for a very long time because of how this stuff works. It's not my favorite thing in the world, to be honest with you. But Feldman Celestin is worthy of the hype. Sure. He is an 18-year-old that hasn't had a single professional at bat. But everyone I've talked to and the limited viewings that I have had suggest plus hit, above average power, outstanding athlete, very, very likely to stick at shortstop, even as a 6'1" guy who is going to, put on some weight. In terms of just pure upside, the best prospect in the system. And that's saying something. There are some good prospects in the system. It's not the same prospect system that we were talking about a couple years ago, but it's still a solid system, in my opinion. I think it's an underrated system. Maybe I should have led with that in the first part, but saying that he has the most upside in the system is quite the compliment. He also has the most volatility because he's never played a professional game. And we have to see how his body develops. I think we've all know what happens to 18-year-olds. A lot can change. And we'll have to see what happens. I'm not questioning his work ethic, but we'll have to see how he makes adjustments, all of that stuff. But just in terms of upside, nobody better in the system. And I'm super excited to see him make his debut in 2024. Professionally, not playing for the Mariners in 2024. Professional debut. All right, last up in these 9 through 6 players that I think could be ranked in a bunch of places is Gabriel Gonzalez. And I think a lot of people would probably have Gonzalez a little higher, and I get it. And he performed really well. After performing well in 2023 season, played in 116 games, 298, 361, 476, 18 homers, and 10 stolen bases. I guess the reason why I'm dropping him here is I did not hear a lot of great reports about Gonzalez for the majority of the time that he was in Everett. When he was in Modesto, which is some friendly confines, dude hit 348, 403, 530, 9 homers, 8 stolen bases over 73 games. When he got the promotion to Everett, 215, 290, 387, 9 homers, 2 stolen bases, 43 to 13 strikeout to walk ratio. And that's one of my favorite things about Gonzalez. I do not see a whole heck of a lot of swing and miss here. I think the plus hit tool is legit. I have some questions about the pop. I think that we're talking more about average power than above average. And if I thought above average, yeah, he's probably ranking in the top 3 in the system. He's also not a great defensive player. He's not terrible, but he's not going to remind anyone of Clemente in the corner outfield. And I don't think he's ever going to play center field for the Mariners. Upside, no doubt about it. And it's worth pointing out that this is a guy who doesn't turn 20 until January, start of January. So there's time for some stuff to be figured out. And it's a fairly small sample size of struggling and a large sample size of being really good. But I would have liked to have seen a little more success in Everett. I don't think that's asking too much. Maybe it is for a 19-year-old, but those numbers were not good. And the fact that he's not a great defensive player, and the fact that he's not like going to be this huge benefit in stolen bases or anything like that, it makes me question him just a little bit and leaves him out of the top 5. There's a couple of guys that I have in my top 5 that people are going to disagree with vehemently, but that's okay. It'd be boring if we. At number 5 for me is Lazaro Montes, and I realize that's an aggressive ranking. I had an aggressive ranking for him the last time we did the list. You can't be surprised that I have an aggressive ranking for him now because the numbers are much more realized. And this is a guy who in 70 games hit 303, a 440 on base percentage, 560 slugging. That's exactly an OPS of 1,000, 13 home runs, a 54 walks, 76 strikeouts, and a couple of stolen bases. Look, the Jordan stuff isn't fair. I get it, though, when you look at him, just because that size is so imposing. And I don't think he has the upside of Jordan Alvarez. I want to make that abundantly clear. That's certainly not an insult. Jordan Alvarez is one of the very best offensive players of this generation. But what he did, especially after the promotion of Modesto, and again, Modesto, very friendly offensive place. But at his age, 19, just turned 19 at the end of the season, by the way, 18 for most of it. For him to come up and hit 321, 429, 565 with 7 homers. So impressive. Over 33 games. That's not that small a sample size. Not major. But I feel like this guy's just been underrated from the get-go. And it's weird too, because he was given a large signing bonus, 2.5 million bucks. And all he's done is hit. And he's going to have to. He's going to have to. I know he's played a bunch in the outfield. I think ultimately first base or DH is what's going to happen because of his size. But I think there's more than enough offensive upside to suggest it. You know, we talked about Felton and Celestin having the highest upside. Lazaro Montes isn't far behind. And I think he has a higher floor because of the fact that we have, number one, we've seen what he can do offensively, at least in the lower levels. I just don't think we talk nearly enough about this guy. I think he's a star. It would not shock me, as much as I like the names above, it would not shock me if Lazaro Montes, I'm touting, I almost said tooting. It would not shock me if I'm touting him as the best prospect in the system. There's a few guys you could be doing that for. You could do that for Selston if he's performing really well. You could do that for a few of the names above. But man, I feel like people are sleeping on Lazaro Montes. This would mean, to me, be the one prospect that I wouldn't want to trade. Yes, I have other names above him, but he'd be the hardest guy for me to give up because I just think he has a chance to be a star. Number 4 on my list is Ryan Bliss, and that's probably going to be the most controversial one. A lot of people I talk to think he's barely in the top 15. Some people have him in the top 10, but in the lower level. I can just tell you what I think. And I think Ryan Bliss is the best prospect at the upper levels for the Seattle Mariners, and by a considerable margin. He ends up hitting 304, 378, 524, 23 homers, 55 stolen bases, which I don't think got talked about nearly enough, 58 walks, 119 strikeouts. And it's worth pointing out that the numbers in AAA don't come close to giving you what those numbers added up to be. I don't think anything I just said made sense, but let me give you his AA numbers. For Amarillo, this guy hit 358, 414, 594, 12 homers, and 30 stolen bases over 68 games. With Reno, he only has a 13-game sample, but it was 196, 274, 357. In Tacoma, much better, but not close to what he did in Amarillo. 251, 356, 466. That's an 822 OPS, like I said. That's good. 10 homers and 20 stolen bases. I just believe in this guy's bat. I believe in his bat, and I also believe in his defense. I think he has a chance to be an outstanding defensive second baseman. Could hold his own at shortstop, I think, too, but an outstanding defensive second baseman. And no, I don't think he can hit for the average that he did in Amarillo, because I think there's more swing and miss in his profile than you would love to see for a guy who's listed at 5'6", 165, and both of those are probably inaccurate. But I do think he's starting to tap into some power. He has excellent bat speed. I love the adjustments he made in Tacoma to end the year, because he was really struggling there after the trade. And it's worth pointing out that he was acquired at the deadline in the Paul Sewald trade that we all just loved. Once again, I will point out that I loved that trade if it's made on November 1st of 2022 or 2023. Hated it at the time because of what it said. There we go. So maybe Ryan Bliss isn't a star, but I also think people are talking about him like this came out of nowhere. Not really. He was the 42nd pick out of his draft. That's not a first rounder, but it's not far from it. And I think we're talking about above average ability to get on base, solid power, plus speed with the ability to use it on the bases, and plus defense. I'll take it. I'll take it and acknowledge some volatility because of his size and because, it's really a half a year of production. I would have liked to have seen him dominate the AFL, and he certainly didn't do that. And maybe that's the reason why he's not in the top 3 for me. But he's pretty easy to put in my top 5. I debated switching Montez and Bliss, but ultimately, I think Bliss has a little bit higher ceiling, maybe a lot higher ceiling. Montez the higher, floor. That's what I meant to say there. Get those confused all the time. What can you do? I'm certainly not restarting this video. Bliss, though, is, I think, super underrated. Super underrated. I thought it was an excellent pickup by Dipoto, even though I did not like the trade because of the timing of it. I expect him to do really good things, and I expect him to do good things for the Mariners in 2020. At number 3, I have Harry Ford, good old Harrison Ford. Don't get cocky, kid, except I think you have the right to be a little cocky because what you've done at the professional level has been pretty impressive. In 2023, he spent the whole year in Everett, hit 257, which, not great. On base percentage of 410, slugging of 430, 15 homers, and 24 stolen bases. I think I'm moving Ford up a little bit. And look, a lot of people think he's the best prospect in the system. I won't argue with them for too long. I think the 2 guys above him definitely belong above him, but it's more compliment to those names than insult to Harry Ford. But I think I move him up a little bit because I'm more convinced that he's going to be a catcher, in part because I'm more convinced that Cal Raleigh is not necessarily a long-term player for the Seattle Mariners. And that breaks my heart a little bit. But I don't think they're going to be able to get an extension done with him. And I think he's going to end up moving on to another team, which is extremely disappointing, like I said. But I think if they were more confident, maybe you start talking about Harry Ford playing elsewhere because he's certainly a good enough athlete to do it. Plus runner. Good enough arm to play anywhere. I think he could be actually a really good third baseman if you wanted to do that, but certainly could play in the corner outfield. Maybe even like second base if you were like really aggressive, but I don't think that's what's going to happen, obviously. I think you're talking about him being a catcher now, and maybe a catcher who can play some other positions and maybe switches long-term, like after a couple of years of catcher, maybe the Craig Biggio treatment. I actually think Craig Biggio is an interesting comp for Harry Ford too. I'm not comparing him to quite the talent of Craig Biggio. I just think there's a similar profile there. Craig Biggio is one of the best baseball players ever. Legitimate Hall of Famer because he is a Hall of Famer. But I do think that Harry Ford has a similar skill set. Draws a ton of walks. I'd actually like to see a little more assertiveness. 103 walks is an awful lot. I want to see him start being a little more aggressive, swinging at some first pitches a little more, showing that plus power that he shows in batting practice. It's starting to come. Slugging percentage went down last year, but tougher confines for sure in Everett. Harry Ford's a really nice player. He'd be someone I would struggle to trade as well. It would have made more sense for me to move Harry Ford if I thought Big Dumper was going to be here for the long term. And I pray I'm wrong. Pray. But I have some concerns. But I do think Harry Ford has a chance to be the starting catcher for your Seattle Mariners for a good amount of time. So I kind of debated number 1 and number 2, but not for very long. So I have Colton Emerson as that second prospect. And look, it is behind Cole Young, but there's a spoiler. Cole Young's number 1. It is a compliment to Young rather than an insult to Emerson because the reports I got on Emerson were spectacular. In 2023, over 24 professional games after being the 23rd pick in the draft, this guy hit 374 with a 496 OBP, a 549 slugging percentage, and 8 stolen bases. Now, he just tore the cover in his very limited sample at the Rookie League in Arizona. 536, 29, 536, 629, 786. I mean, that's spectacular. But then he played almost a month in Modesto as a player who was a high school bat. And by the way, I said 2030. It was the 22nd pick. We regret the year. But as an 18-year-old making that pro debut, 302 with a 436 on base percentage and 444 slugging. It's a relatively small sample, but it's still really impressive. Really impressive. And you could argue maybe he and Arroyo compete for highest floor. Definitely a plus hit tool. The swing is conducive to hitting line drives. He recognizes spin well. He will use the entire field. Will certainly pull the baseball in the inner half. And, the question mark for me is how much power is going to come along with it, which is a question mark for Cole Young as well. We'll get there. Just be patient. I'm telling myself to be patient. Why are we talking about Cole Young? It's Colt Emerson time. I have some questions about how much power will translate, but I think the raw power can be above average or should be graded above average. In game, we're talking about 45, 50 potentially right now. Going to have to use more of the lower half, maybe add some loft to the swing, and maybe not a lock to stick at shortstop. 6'1", 195, solid average runner, good instincts, really good arm, will play well at third base, which I think would be the position that naturally makes the most sense for him to move over to. You could try second base too, but you're probably moving him over to third base. And I think he has the bat for it to play. Will not surprise me at all if he's number one on my list at this point next year. Will not surprise me if he's number one overall on my list in July. He's really impressive. His professional debut went about as swimmingly well as possible. And if you wanted to say he was the top prospect in the system, I wouldn't argue with you very long. If you want to say he's the third best prospect in the system, I wouldn't argue with you very long. In fact, I'll never argue with you because what a stupid thing to argue over. Anyway, Colt Emerson, really, really good draft pick. And at number one, I have Cole Young, which is no surprise because, hey, you had to believe that he was coming. And also because I said it during the Cole Emerson situation. 277, 399, 448. That's an 847 OPS, 11 homers, and 22 stolen bases. It's worth pointing out, we talked about a lot of guys who struggled in Everett. Cole Young ain't one of them. In Modesto, 78 games, 267, 396, 429. That's certainly solid, especially for a player as young as Cole Young is. But when he got into Everett, 292, 404, 479, 883 OPS, and that's over 48 games. Played 78 in Modesto, 48 in Everett. Not an even split, but some good time in both. And he was much better at the higher level, which is awesome to see, especially when you remember Modesto, friendly hitting confines in a friendly hitting league. There's nothing Cole Young can't do to me. I have some questions, just like with Emerson, about the power. We're probably talking about more of a 50 grade guy, 15 to 18 homer seasons. But hit tool, I've seen some plus. I don't think that's doing it justice. And I know 277 doesn't exactly scream plus plus. You watch this guy swing the bat and you watch his ability to recognize pitches, and it's very clear. He follows the baseball so well. I think it is a plus plus hit tool. I think he has plus speed, above average at least, strong throwing arm, and I think he's going to stick at shortstop. And if you do make the move, we're talking about second base. Cole Young is a rare combination, in my humble estimation, of high floor and high ceiling. There just aren't a whole heck of a lot of guys like that. The Mariners have one. They've crushed their last two first-round picks. And I think they crushed the 2023 draft, and I think they did a pretty darn good job in 2022 as well. They're getting so much better at this. I mean, you saw what they've done with Kirby and with Gilbert. Yeah, Hancock's been a little bit of a disappointment, but there's been some flashes there. The job that they've done in the drafts these last few years has been really impressive. And I know a lot of people think I love to crap on the Seattle Mariners. On the contrary, and I think that their scouting team is as good as it gets right now. They're very good at their job. A lot of teams would have among the worst farm systems in baseball with all the players the Seattle Mariners have graduated. Not the case for the Mariners, in my humble estimation. Now, there's no top 20 prospect, and there's more idea of baseball player, which I know I've said a whole bunch in these videos, than realized talent for the most part. There's very little here that you can count on to help you in 2024. Of the guys that I've mentioned, Dollard has a shot, Baroa, Hancock, Class A, maybe Bliss, and maybe just maybe Harry Ford. Probably not, but maybe just maybe. Most of these guys are a couple of years away, and that's, it is what it is. I also want to mention that the Mariners got a little bit lucky, not well, a little bit. They moved from the 18th pick to up to the 15th pick. So they will have a top 15 selection in what's a pretty good draft. So they will add to that talent. So yeah, that's the system. Those are the top 15 guys for me. And there's obviously a lot more, but I don't want to bore you with a bunch of prospects and a bunch of relievers, to be honest with you, in the next step, in the next group anyway. I think you can see I'm losing my voice a little bit. So I'll again ask you to hit like and please hit subscribe. If you have questions about a prospect, go ahead and leave them in the comments section. I'll do my best to get to all of them. Really appreciate your support. But those are my guys, the top 15, 47-minute video. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you soon.